Hey everyone, welcome to the American Sidebar podcast. I'm your host, Joe Fitzgerald. The date is October 27th, 2023. Along with me is my co-host,
Brian Mason.
On today's show, we have Zach Even-Esh. Zach was a former competitive wrestler, bodybuilder, and strength and conditioning coach. Brian, can you tell us a little bit more about Zach Even-Esh?
Joe, our guest, Zach Even-Esh, is, as you said, a world-class strength and conditioning coach. He was inspired to develop his philosophy of what he calls building his armor by his family's military background. With both a mom and dad who served in the Israeli army and an older brother who served in both the elite Israeli Special Forces and United States Marine Corps, he has trained some of the highest level athletes in both the elite military units and the sports industry. Currently, he's a high school strength and conditioning coach and owns his own training facility, Underground Strength Gym in Manasquan, New Jersey. His book, The Encyclopedia of Underground Strength and Conditioning, is due for its long-awaited second release. Zach, welcome to the show.
Stand by for the show.
Tick, tick, boom. Who bringing the noise? Go, baby, we bringing our toys. Separate men from the boys. Chopper be singing, she'll be on the voice. Bang, bang.
Hey, what's going on, Zach?
Good to be here, man. Thank
Awesome.
you for having me.
Yeah. Brian, how's it going with you?
Going pretty good, Joe. I was glad you remembered that I was here.
Yeah, no problem. I actually
You
forgot,
forgot.
and then I looked to the right. Zach, how did you kind of get started in? I know you were in powerlifting, right?
Bodybuilding.
Bodybuilding.
Yeah.
So I kind of know the story,
Yes.
but for those that aren't familiar,
I try to tweak up the story because there's so many. How did you get into it? So, when I started getting into training for sports as a teenager, there wasn't strength and conditioning was kind of a very under the radar quote unquote career. If you went to a gym, there was personal trainers. Everything was bodybuilding based. And in the 80s, when I started training, there were mom and pop style gyms. You didn't really have chain gyms. And the gyms in my area were kind of frightening, to be honest with you. So I was like, I have to earn my way to get there. And so I actually first began training out of my brother's room where he set up equipment that we both would purchase through jobs. And, we had jobs since we were kids. I had a paper out, I think in second, definitely third grade, because I had my bike stolen in elementary school. I had to get 2 paper outs mowing lawns. So we would buy equipment and kind of piece together his room. Things like Menlo Park Mall in Edison had a place called Herman's Sporting Goods.
I remember Herman's.
Yep. So we bought 10-pound plates from there. And I remember it was like, sacrilege to cross Route 1 on your bike. And all this thing was like, somebody on Larchmont Road is going to see us and going to tell our parents. And like, we're going to be grounded.
Could you imagine a third grader going across that road right now?
I may have
or
been
having a job?
I may have been fifth grade at the time, but my older brother, really inspired to say like a little bit crazy behavior. He was always fascinated with pushing his body, like the supplements here. I still remember my brother buying. There was an old company. I think it still exists. It was called Twin Labs.
yeah,
He bought.
do.
Yeah, and I think the labeling is still the same as the late 80s.
yeah.
So he had bought, supplements from there. And my mom was a nurse. And I remember my mom like flipping out at my brother thinking like it's steroids. So she throws out everything he buys, all the money he saves up. But my brother started me with it because he would buy bodybuilding magazines. And the book that got me going was Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, the massive 600-page book. Well, we bought that book when we were in Israel, and we would spend the summer there every couple of years because my grandparents lived there, and there was a little bookstore in town, and I remember sitting on the floor reading the book until, I'm not sure what they called it, but in Europe they call it siesta. They shut the stores down for 2 hours. So I think it was 1 to 3 or 2 to 4.
How old were you?
I think I would have been fifth grade at the time, mid-'80s, roundabout when that book came out. And the book was double the price of the American dollar. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting on the floor. I'm like reading it. I'm looking at these photos. And the photos, basically, the black and white photos were not posing photos. It was action. And it told a story. Like, this guy looked like he was just so strong he could run through a brick wall. And this photo looked like the intensity was jumping out of the book. So we buy the book. We ask my grandfather. We come back after the siesta thing's over. We buy the book. And that book just made its rounds through the house. You know, I would read it all the time, but I didn't really start getting into the training until the end of 8th grade. And I actually remember leading up to that point, like 6th grade, 7th grade, trying to work out in my brother's room, dumbbells, this, that. And I would do it for a week, and then I'd stop. And I remember saying, like, internally in my mind, like, what's wrong with you? Like, why do you keep quitting? Why can't you just do this? Something clicked it was the mid-June of 1989, the end of 8th grade. And then I never stopped. So since, let's just say, it was 2 weeks before 8th grade ended. So June of 1989, now we're almost the end of 2023. I don't even know. I was 13. Now I'm almost 48. So I'm about exercising, training 35 years.
Yep.
So when I, take that experience, whether from training in bodybuilding gyms, coaching thousands upon thousands of kids, like when I see a squat 50 feet away, I could like shout and say, move your foot over 1 inch, because I'm looking at the heel just grazing off the floor. So, early influences was bodybuilding, which was really not good for sports performance. And then also, like speaking with Brian about his son being younger, I was also younger, 13 as a freshman. And then...
that's around the time you started training him at school.
Right, he's 13. When you're 13, that's very different than being... Your body's just at a different level most of the time than compared to being 14. And so I was a year younger than everybody. I didn't have the emotional, aggression. I joined the wrestling team freshman year. My older brother tells me this is the sport. Leading up to that, with parents who were not born in America, my dad didn't know about football, baseball, so he would take us to play soccer. Where did he take me to play soccer? At the park. I played soccer against, men who didn't speak English. He would take me to play pickup basketball at Roosevelt Park, and it was like grown men playing street ball. That's how I learned to play.
Street ball is no joke. Yeah.
Street ball was the best. I still remember trying to block a guy. He comes under and his head nails me in the chin, and I think he knocked me out. And I remember just being on the grass, and nobody was like, "Are you okay?" It was my dad and the other men were like, "Okay, you're good to go."
Yeah,
and they
throw
were
some dirt on it.
Yeah. They're pulling me back into the game. So my training started Brothers Room, local YMCA, which was a little hole-in-the-wall gym. And YMCA's actually used to be known as a hub for bodybuilders and powerlifters. It was known 60s, 70s, 80s. Things started getting more of the machines because of Arnold and Sylvester Stallone and Jack LaLanne being so popular. Yeah. So it got away from the strength training you needed to get strong for sport. So unfortunately, when I started going to these bodybuilding gyms, I was reading magazines, fabricated articles that didn't have anything to do with really getting strong for sport. Everything talked about squeeze the muscle, feel the muscle. I never even deadlifted in high school.
Yeah.
Everything was machine-based, and so I had a good physique, but I wasn't powerful. And, why I like to share that is because, for example, my son is a freshman, and he's bigger than I was when I was a graduating senior. Yeah. And it's because here's how we eat, here's how you train.
All the lessons learned from Dad.
Correct. All the mistakes I made, but those gyms of those early 90s were amazing. And one in particular in my town, there was a pro bodybuilder, Rich Gaspari, who used to train there, but then he had moved to California. But this gym was 7,000 square foot warehouse. The owner, I don't know if he bought the machines or welded everything, but he welded all the dumbbells. If anything broke, a curtain would go up in the back and he'd weld. but everybody was so strong. The dumbbells went up to 180. If somebody was doing lat pull downs or cable rows, they were attaching 45-pound plates. Like, that place was built, like
It's an old school Iron Master
it
type
was
gym.
the best. And he actually owned a second spot in Bayville. He simply called it Dynamic Fitness 2. And, as the mid-90s crept, bodybuilding, quote-unquote hardcore bodybuilding, started fading. And then fitness came out. You'd go to the bookstore or magazine and you'd see men's fitness. I was like, what is men's fitness, And he shut down his one gym, comes to this gym, and it was like overnight he transformed the culture into that of like fitness. So the equipment was like tan and brown. The music was pumping. I mean, that was the place I was afraid to go to. I had to earn my way to get there. Then he comes back. He paints the machines white. The padding is like baby blue. And then every week is a new sign. Don't drop your weights. No chalk.
Yeah.
No, don't do this. Don't do that. And I remember it was like it sucked the energy out of the place. And so what I started doing was gym hopping from one gym to the next. I got my license. I'm at Powerhouse Gym of Rahway or Avenel near the prison. Then I'm going to World Gym Denellen. And nobody had this atmosphere that I was looking for until when I started going to the bodybuilding shows. The guys that were like dominating, it was like sports. It was this one gym, Diamond Gym. And Diamond Gym was in Maplewood, located right outside of Irvington, which is like one of the,
Nice area.
I was going to say, I don't, if any Irvington listeners are out there, I'm just speaking the facts. It's like one of the murder capitals of New Jersey. So you had to like go through a very tough area. And so when I heard about that gym and how they open up at 5 a.m., I was like, oh, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be there first. And so this was in the beginning of college. So I went through, I had the experience of a hardcore gym. Then it goes like they kind of, they transform it in a negative manner. And I felt like I needed to be around intensity. So when I heard about that gym and I saw that the best bodybuilders were from there, I was like, I'll get there at 5. So I woke up so early. My father at the time had his business was in Irvington because they had cheap rates for the warehouse space. His business was medical manufacturing, like surgical instruments. So he gets me directions from the chief of police. This is before a smartphone or any navigation, so it's on paper. So at like 3:30 a.m., I drive through Irvington to go to Diamond Gym, and I was like, oh my God, like this place is scared the hell out of me. Drive through Irvington, and I remember getting lost and rerouting countless times to go back on the Parkway, cut back through Irvington. And the reason why I kept getting lost was the gym didn't have a sign outside. They supposedly lost the sign during a storm, and they just never replaced it. So the gym was an old bank. So it was just this old brown building. And I get there, and it's like 5 to 5. And I'm like, yeah, baby, I'm first. And I park in the back, and I start walking down the hill. And I hear the music going like, dush, dush, dush. I was like, maybe the guy who works here got here before me. And then I get down, I turn, I'm on the sidewalk, and then I open the door, and I get like hit with a wave of like the heat from the gym. And there's like 30 plus guys. They're midway through their workout, cut off flannels, sweating. The music is blasting, and everybody's working. Not a talker anywhere. All I remember is a scene of like work. And I was like, I thought they opened at 5.
Yeah.
Those guys were easily there by like 4:15. And that experience there was like, all right, this is the gym I'm going to join. So I joined that gym freshman year in college. I would commute from Edison to Kane. But unfortunately, that early, I call it pretty boy bodybuilding, those were the methods I used to train for wrestling. It was complete opposite of what I needed. I actually thought, now being a full-time strength coach at a high school, I'm on my 5th year. I remember saying to myself, oh, these kids are going to know how to train because of the internet sharing so much great information. I'm going to, baseball players are going to know about this guy and shoulder health and things that football players are going to know about this guy, and they're going to be doing deep squats and box jumps. Well, when I got to the high school that I'm at, the kids would do like death-defying bench press until they like almost decapitated themselves. And then they would curl
Totally not functional for what they need.
for 45 minutes. And I was like, no, I didn't see one kid do a leg exercise for my first 2 weeks until I organized it. And I was like, man, these kids are still doing, they're actually training worse than what I trained as a kid. And so through those years, right, through high school years, it's bodybuilding. Then I get to Diamond Gym and I learn a different style of bodybuilding. Those guys were more like power bodybuilders, because even if they weren't competing in bodybuilding, there was this like unspoken rule there of like lift heavy and work your ass off, train hard.
Yeah.
And so you would look left, right, forwards, backwards. Everybody was working. I mean, the inspiration from it just reminds me of Arnold's books. So I started learning, like if I want to build that power, I can't be doing this pump up weight. And it was a lot of free weights, and it was a lot of stuff that was welded together, fixed in that nature. And so I would see bodybuilders incline benching 405. I would see guys curling, seated dumbbell curls with the hundreds, very strict, strong men. And once I learned that, my physique really transformed. And then through college, going through college, I competed in bodybuilding and did pretty good as a teenage bodybuilder. But then after college, if you guys remember, mixed martial arts came out in the late or mid 90s. Wrestlers were dominating it. Collegiate wrestlers, guys that I knew about through following like Iowa wrestling. So I started thinking to myself, now I'm going to redeem myself because I trained the wrong way. I didn't achieve the success I wanted as a high school wrestler. Now I'm going to go out and I'm going to smash people, and I'm going to learn to find how to train in MMA. It wasn't called MMA. UFC early days was called NHB, No Holds Barred Fighting. So I Google shoot fighting. I don't even think Google existed. There was Yahoo,
Bing,
AOL, Bing. What about a dog?
Excite,
Dog pile? Do you remember that? It'd say you'd
Yeah.
search something and it would say go fetch.
Yeah.
Very old internet days.
Yep.
And so I find a place in Elizabeth. So everything keeps rerouting me back to the hood. It's like I can't go in. So this place in Elizabeth teaching shoot fighting, the guy who owned it, I'm pretty sure he still is the referee for the main event in the UFC. His name's Dan. They call him Big Dan Miragliotta.
Oh yeah.
That was his gym.
He lives around here, doesn't he?
I'm not sure. This is I'm almost 48. I'd say it's 20. I tore my ACL at like age 27. So 21 years ago, I was there. So I think he lived maybe in, that place was in Elizabeth. Maybe he lived in like Rahway or Clark or something like that.
Yeah, someone I know just recently told me that he lives close to
Down the shore here.
Yeah, somewhere. It's close. I'm not sure exactly.
If you're up in North Jersey for a while, you either love it and you're staying, or you're like, I gotta get to a place that's like a little more relaxed. But he had this place, and he would not always be there, and nobody really trained you. It was like you went there and just would fight every day. So I'm wrestling guys. I'm learning Muay Thai. 2 weeks into it, without knowing anything about jiu-jitsu.
He's a Muay Thai.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you're Muay Thai. I love it. And 2 weeks in, I enter a national level grappling competition, and I win one, I lose one, and they say to me, "Look, you lost in overtime to a judo black belt with 2 weeks of training.
Wow.
Let's get you to join the fight team." And I start kind of going back to my old ways of just training so hard that you break your body down.
Yeah.
And there was no really emphasis on recovery back then. Nothing, like not even a foam roller, okay? So It's not like today where you learn to train hard, learn to recover. So in that short process, I tore my ACL, and that's when I started researching, like, all right, I'm so quote unquote big and strong, but at that time I broke my nose. I had torn my shoulder wrestling my brother while on break from the Marines. This was going to be my second knee surgery, and I just wanted answers. And so, knowing that the best wrestlers at the time came from Russia, I researched Russian wrestling training, and that's when I came across the lessons of Louis Simmons of Westside Barbell. So anybody who's listening or watching, if you've never heard of Westside Barbells, you should watch the documentary Westside versus the World. That gives you a little bit of an insight, but when I would learn from him, he was training those early MMA fighters, but he was also training guys in the NFL or training guys for the NFL Combine. And I would call him every week on my break from teaching. And what hit me was, after I tore my ACL, he's like, okay, this is how you're going to rehab. You're going to get a sled. We're going to get bands. You're going to start box squatting. You're going to squat with chains. And so I ordered a sled. I remember dragging a sled through the park, and a park ranger pulled me over. Like, that's how early it was. They were like, what are you doing?
Like,
what
there's an
is
EDP
this?
in the park.
This guy's a maniac.
Yeah, they were like on the verge of like trying to kick me out. When I purchased Russian, kettlebells, they were called Russian kettlebells.
That was
and
Pavel, right?
Pavel. And they were expensive. I bought 2 pairs for $550. And I remember thinking to myself, I just spent $1,000 and on these. And I remember when I carried the 70s, I was like, no, I carried the 53s. I was like, these feel heavy. Maybe I never should have bought the 70s. I didn't even touch them yet. But I'm very obsessed with trying to, it's not so much winning. It's like the process of getting to the top. And I was going to be on this mission to help other athletes avoid my injuries, my painful mistakes, not just the physical pain, but the emotional pain, because, only 6 or 7% of high school kids will compete in college. And with my experiences in college, I've coached at Rutgers and at Lehigh, kids are quitting every other week. Mm-hmm. They're quitting, or they're kind of getting forced off the team. It's just the level of expectation and the intensity and commitment. To say it jumps tenfold is like a dramatic understatement. I mean, the level just jumps so high that if you're not fully committed to the life, it's not going to work for you. But going back to the lessons from Louis, and I know I jump around a lot because I have so much in my head, his influence to me was he would teach me something or just share a story, and then I would implement it on myself and train others. So when I started training guys, it started out of my parents' garage, which was, 3 times the size of your studio here, then the backyard, and then I would go to a playground so I could have an open field or a hill or picnic tables to jump on and off. So I was learning to train on anything, no gym, no renting a space, that was unheard of. And then from that, I bought, or my fiance and I, we weren't even married, we bought our first house together. It had a 2-car garage. We had to gut the whole house, but we gutted and revamped the garage first. And so I was training in the garage before we lived in the house for a year. So kids would train in the garage, the backyard. Then we would drive down the road. My first group would be, I think, 5. So at 5:30, 5:45, nobody's at the elementary school. So they're pushing my truck across the parking lot, sprinting hills, dragging sleds on grass. And people were finding my email from all around the world. I remember getting emails from white collar workers from other countries saying, screw this accounting job. I want to do what you do, They're like, I want to flip tires with athletes and push trucks.
Screw Arnold. I want to go with Even-Esh.
Yeah. So they were invigorated by seeing somebody make something happen from nothing. And the group of kids that I trained, it was all these small groups because I didn't have a lot of space. But they went from this really kind of like, pretty average kids, good kids, hardworking kids, not the most gifted, but they worked. And then the training that was implemented was so different than anybody else. Their performance increased so far beyond that they shocked everybody, to the point where I remember a dad once called saying, I don't really, I don't know how to put this, but I'm so sick of my kids losing to a kid wearing an Underground Strength Gym T-shirt. It's like every time my kid loses, I see a kid with an Underground Strength Gym shirt. So, and also in the early days, I never sold a shirt. You had to earn it. So you had to win something, or you had to train for a year. So everything was based on the earning. And so through, the decades of this, now I'm in Manasquan for 11 years. What did we say Hurricane Sandy was? 2012?
Yeah.
So 11 years minus a month. I signed the lease December 1st. But my first warehouse was Edison. And then I partnered with a guy who had multiple, programs under one roof. The way that happened, this was in Scotch Plains, was kids from that area would travel to Edison. And one team in particular would send their wrestlers and football players who would not make the lineup, get cut, or if they were a wrestler, they'd be they had maybe 10% wins, 90% losses. They'd be send them to the underground. And then the next year they'd go instead of 3-25, they'd be 25-5. Or the kid sits the bench, then the kid is scoring touchdowns, breaking records. So they built this. This guy buys a building. They get a world champion jiu-jitsu practitioner in there, Vitor Ribeiro. They call him Shaolin. Mm-hmm. They get Jerry Cooney, who was a heavyweight runner-up boxer. And then my buddy Donnie DeFlippis has a wrestling club. They put him in there. They're like, you're the missing link. So I open a second spot. And everything's kind of a whirlwind because I open that spot. I get hired at Rutgers. It's all at the same time. It's I haven't really had much time to breathe since I got into strength and conditioning. Same thing that happened when I got hired at Lehigh. I never applied to work there. What happened was helping at Blair Academy with the wrestling program. When that wrestling coach went to Lehigh to start what's now called regional training centers, they do this now we have American wrestlers competing at the Olympic level. We've always had that, but now we have more than just going to Colorado. Now they're in the major universities. Lehigh starts their program. He's like, you want to come up, train these guys train some wrestlers, guys that are prepping for world championships and Olympic trials. Yeah, I'll come up, sure. I go up, I train them in this old wrestling room, so beautiful. You see this wood is it was wood, beams, cathedral, old wrestling photos from every All-American from 1930. I mean, you could just feel the history. Then their weight room was 750 square feet. Just amazing. So I trained them there. Then the coach gives me a little tour of Lehigh. Lehigh is pretty small. It's well, I had a great time. I gotta hit the road. I got a little 2-hour drive to head back home. Let me know. I'll help you any way I can. Let me know what you need. He's like, okay, we need you. So the next year, they raised money through what is now pretty popular in the colleges, getting money from donors. So they raised money, or maybe one guy just wrote a check, and they, that's how it worked. Because when I did that interview that I didn't know I was doing was the old wrestling building. I come back, we're in a $25 million building that was built by 8 men. So 8 guys need a $3 million write-off, and they just get me in. And what's funny is when I went there, it was too nice. So I actually, for 2 weeks, trained them outside. I went to my old teammate who owns a restaurant. I traded him some of my I had a new book at the time, The Encyclopedia of Underground Strength. He gave me empty kegs. I took it to a neighbor. We filled it with sand and water. He welded it shut. So I brought up to Lehigh tires for the sleds, kegs for carrying, and then I just trained them outside. It's called the other side of the mountain where the football team trained. I was like, we're going to earn our way to this nice weight room. And that, my experience at Lehigh was great, so great. I still speak with a lot of the guys.
When was this, Zach?
I was at Lehigh in 2014, 2015, Rutgers 2017, 2018, and then I guess Middletown South. What are we almost in 2024? This is and I've done 4 years exactly. October 30th is 4 years. So
you came on like right around before COVID.
Yeah, that's right. I was here for 4 months before COVID happens, and then I got to tell you what's interesting about that is, these mistaken assumptions I make of like, okay, COVID's going on. These kids are going to be killing the push-ups. They're going to be jumping, sprinting. We're going to get back to school. Everybody's going to be fit.
I had one of those at home.
No, nobody did.
He was doing
not many.
Jumping rope at 1 in the morning.
Not many kids did work.
When you started training kids, from back in the day, where it's over decades now, right?
Yeah, 20 plus years ago.
Looking at it now, do you think the drive of the kids has changed with social media and everything else? It's kind of
things that changed is kids are. It's not that the drive has changed. They're distracted more, and that is the big struggle. It's this
information overload.
Oh, yeah, you overthink. It makes it hard for them to listen to you. But then I also put myself back. I remember being a teenager and not listening to my coach, who, if looking back now, they were ahead of their time, and so of course I wish I listened to them. But kids are so busy, and here's the other major problem. The club sports are requiring so much training from the kids. We can't stay open late enough in private facilities to train them. And so you have kids with a very high level of sports skill, and then we have a massive uprise of injuries. So I don't need to look at research papers and be like, oh, the ACL injury rate 20 years ago with this. Here's all I look at. I'm training hundreds of kids every day. I've trained thousands of kids. I mean, I can't even tell you how many. Let me tell you how many injuries we had before the iPhone came out. I don't even know if we had a kid get a surgery.
Yeah.
This year at the school I'm at, within the first 6 weeks, let's just go from August, when practice starts picking up, we had more injuries in 4 weeks than I had collectively in 4 years. And now what I'm doing is kind of like documenting. Okay, did this athlete train in the winter? No. Did this athlete train in the spring? No. What kind of injury did this athlete have? Okay, this athlete did train. Was he able to rebound? Was she able to rebound from injury? Yes. Did they train? Yes. So it's very simple.
Overtraining or training wrong?
I don't think kids are really overtraining. They're overdoing the sports stuff.
You're just seeing kids get Tommy John surgery.
Yeah,
in high school now.
That was pretty rare.
That's right.
That was a very rare thing, to have that surgery. Now it's very common to see it. I actually was watching, my son plays baseball. And I have friends who work in pro baseball. And so it's funny, like when all this arm care stuff came out, I remember reaching out to my friend, and he's been in pro baseball for also decades. And I was like, dude, what is this arm care? Is it just a fad? Like, what is the specific? He's like, it's everything you're doing, Zach. It's the dumbbell row, the pull-up, it's the bands, it's the extensions, it's building muscle. It's what I call body armor. And then the strength training builds the connective tissue. But then if these, I'm going to straight up call them businesses. Listen, if you're running a travel team with several teams, you've got $1 million business every year or a multi-million-dollar business. Think of it like, I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars it costs for my son to play baseball, but he plays, obviously, in the springtime is school ball. As soon as that's over, now they're in summer. And then I tell them, look, I don't want him doing fall ball. And then, my wife's like, well, maybe we'll get there when we can. I'm like, I don't like that plan.
Yeah.
Then they're like, listen, if you're on this team, you're agreeing to fall ball. And I straight up tell these coaches, I'm like, listen, I've been seeing so many injuries, and I actually saw a kid let's see, my son's a freshman. I feel like it was 3 years ago, maybe a sixth grader. I was watching him pitch in Little League, and he broke his elbow. And I look at that kid,
Wow.
and all I know is that kid, you know, I probably could have bet my car he can't do 10 perfect push-ups. By 10 perfect push-ups, I mean you got a nice stable trunk, core's locked in, everything's lined up. You know, like I could take things in, like eyeball it. So freshman football starts the last day of school. 70% of those kids can't do one perfect push-up. Forget 10, one. So here's what I tell parents, and I tell them, listen, I'm not being rude. My job is always to protect the kids. How do I protect your son or daughter? Get you stronger. Put on body armor. Prepare the mind and the body for the rigors of not just the game. This is the mistake. They're training for the game. You need to train for the season. So, for example, Brian's son played football. Football, technically, once school is out, they do install. I get it. It's not that hard. You're running drills. You don't have full pads, but you're practicing. You're practicing 3 days a week. So we're just going to map it out here. July, August, okay? Scrimmages start in the middle of August. Now school starts September, October. We got all November. We're at a 5-month season right now. Let me tell you the emotional stress these kids are at on that 5th month. They're tired. They've been waking up for 7 or 6 a.m. workouts all summer. Mm-hmm. And this is the other thing. When do kids go to bed now?
Yeah.
No, but when I was in high school, I didn't, at 10 p.m., 10:15, lights out.
Yeah, they're on their phones looking at stuff.
They're on their phone. So every athlete is operating at a deficit because they undersleep. Their nutrition is pretty crappy. You know, I'll tell you that. I'm seeing freshmen that weigh 80 to 90 pounds. Jeez. Now, granted, that could be genetic. If your parents are small frame, there's genetics, right? That's why, you know, my buddy played in the NFL for 10 years. He's 6'6". His brothers are all 6'4" to 6'6". They're all jacked. Yeah. You're not in the NFL by accident. You know what I'm saying? But not only that, his work ethic kept him in it. You know, NFL is a year and a half is the average time. So if you're 10 years, it's because you've really worked for it. But so back to the overtraining. I'm going to be 48. How old are you going to be, Joe? 44.
I'll be 45.
I'm going to be 51.
51. So we grew up in the 80s. This is how I explain to moms and dads who are like, I'm afraid it's going to be too much. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you remember in the 80s when you rode your bike for 12 hours a day and breakfast was cereal and maybe you ate cheese crackers at the 7-Eleven? Guess what? We didn't overtrain. Our legs were fine. We did it 7 days in a row. Mm-hmm. So now, one of you guys said information overload. When kids are like, this hurts, that hurts. I don't know if I could work my legs. I'm like, when you play basketball, what are you doing every day? Working your legs. You're running, sprinting, jumping. You know, every sport I mention, it just reminds me of a story. I remember training a 6th or 7th grader, basketball player. He broke his foot while jumping rope during the warm-up. The dad was so like, what happened? I can't believe it. So I was like, I'm going to break it down for you. When did your son start playing basketball? Whatever he said, 5. When did he join AAU? 7. How many months a year is AAU? 11 months. How old is he now? 12. So for 5 years, he's done 11 months of sprinting, jumping, landing, cutting. What other sports have you done? None. Well, because you don't give him a break, his body just found a way to create a break, literally and figuratively speaking. So kids today don't eat enough. They don't eat properly. Not only is just the phone this thing of convenience, food is a thing of convenience. So the food that kids are eating is really...
It's worse than ever, I think, right? The
quality. I also think it's because they're distracted, right? Because they're on the phones and they're constantly doing something, and sometimes you just forget, right? And then you're on to the next thing, and you know, it's an afterthought to eat or, you know, kind of take care of it.
Some kids have told me, like, they just don't want to get up. You know, I've trained kids at 6 p.m., and they tell me...
I got that problem now. I don't want to get up either.
They don't want to get up. But these kids, I tell them, you got an obligation. If you signed up for a sport, especially a combat sport, And combat sport would be girls soccer. If you've ever watched girls soccer, they jump in the air to head a ball.
Yep.
You know, they're smashing into each other. It's like hockey without pads.
Yeah.
Every time I watch a girls soccer game, you know what comes to my mind? Not speed and agility. They're already sprinting all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm thinking body armor and strength. And so I trained soccer before coming here, and looking at the girls who are now juniors, seniors, I was like, I remember when they were freshmen, they looked like stick figures. Now they look strong. They look like their body could handle impact. And what that tells me there is this is not a 3-week, 6-week, 6-month thing. It is a year-round. It's a year-round commitment, and it's a process.
They have to train and eat for that year-round.
Everything. And you mentioned something about the food. During COVID, I made mention to my wife. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about food with growing up in the 80s. I always said nobody in school was like, oh, my mom has cancer, my dad, my aunt. You did not hear it.
No.
And it's not that they were hiding it. It's just that it was something that was less common. As these food scientists began chemically engineering the food more, we see it much more common and in a much more younger age. And I also look at, what do young boys look like now? Oftentimes not really good skin, not ripped and muscular.
How many kids did you know that had food allergies when you were a kid?
That's right, none.
My son has a bad peanut allergy. Sometimes 4 kids out of a house.
So it's funny, you said something about girls soccer, and it's something that I've kind of touched on every once in a while as well. You look at the gym now, right? And I don't know if it's just because of the new kind of fad with, Instagram and social media. Everybody's like, Ashley Fitness and, Tammy Fitness and all this stuff, right? It's a big thing for especially women, right? The girls are out there. I see, and I go to at least 5 gyms, right? I have memberships to 5 gyms. I go to different ones for different reasons, right? So I'll go to I go to Jersey Strong.
Yes.
It's right over here. It's really quick. I can go in and out, and they have a good leg workout and stuff like that. Just everything's really quick. Do some cardio. I go to Powerhouse in Hazlitt. They have a lot of different things. I don't like their benches too much because they're new and they, it just doesn't have that cushion to it. You know what I mean?
Some
Very
new
solid.
equipment. I went with my son to a retro.
Yeah.
When I tell it to the kids, I'm like, I went to an anonymous gym. The equipment, I feel, is not made by lifters.
Yeah.
Because the bench is narrow.
They're narrow. Yeah.
Does not support your scapula.
100%.
Which is dangerous for football linemen. So, equipment needs to be specific. Not crazy specific, but
That's why I don't work out.
Well, so someone said the other day, it was actually pretty funny. We were I was actually doing incline flies.
Yep.
And I've been working out so long that for me, I can't just do the one body part that everybody does. As I got older, for me it was more supersets. So now it's
I love supersets.
I got to constantly be doing it. I got to constantly be on the move and kind of just change things.
Yep.
But I was doing inclines, and then after the inclines, I get down, I do an incline and then fly, or incline and then incline press.
Oh, yeah.
Bench press, right? So I do it. So I get down, I do the flies, right? And just the way the bench is positioned, it's my shoulder blades are coming out, and I just yanked it, and it kind of just
dangerous.
Yeah, it is, and I hurt my shoulder actually doing it, and I was like, I heard a pop,
No good.
I got distracted. But the one part about the girls that are in the gym right now, to me, right, look much stronger, right? They're, and I know you always hear, girls are, they kind of, grow up a little quicker than the guys, and then kind of, they even out. But girls now, I mean, they're really fit, and it's, the populace just in all these different gyms. There's more girls than there is, guys.
That's interesting. My buddy, you mentioned a couple things. So my buddy invented something called the fat pad for that, but he did it more so for like football linemen and powerlifters because he saw guys tearing their pec or blowing out a labrum.
Yeah.
So he invented the fat pad.
And that goes on the bench?
It's a replacement pad. So
Okay.
he always says, like, if you really want to, have the best equipment, you probably need to build your own gym.
Yeah.
But some of these kind of there still are private gyms where guys know about lifting. But if you go to like a chain gym, their equipment supplier might be just based on a very medium body type, not somebody who's really got a whole lot of muscle. They're kind of supplying the same equipment that would go into like a hotel. But with the girls, that is interesting. So I have a friend that has a PhD in biomechanics, and he was very much like into the strength training and the research behind it. And then you probably heard of him, Brett Contreras. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I have.
So Brett did not like go out to try to like have this massive following of women, but his gym is like all women, and they all squat, deadlift, military press, weighted pull-ups, and it initially starts with them wanting to have a bigger butt, grow butt muscles. Yeah. So he teaches them the glute bridge or the hip thrust and step-ups, but then they fall in love with the strength aspect. And I think they fall in love. Yeah, they like the results, but I think the most powerful thing about training, whether it's for the girls, the women, the boys, the men, is what it does for the mind.
Yeah.
To me, that's the best. That's because
why I work out.
To me, yes, I call it iron therapy.
Yep.
And when I look at it for the younger generation, they really, struggle with confidence, as most young boys do. To be confident doesn't just happen. You have to kind of like put yourself through very challenging times and keep facing challenges. That's what training does on the regular. So at my high school, during COVID, there was all these regulations, who could come to the weight room, blah, blah, blah. Once the weight room got open during lunchtime, and then there's like a free period, we're definitely seeing over 100 kids in that weight room, and many of them are not athletes.
Yeah.
And it's great. I'll show them, if I could just show them one thing, and the next time one thing. And then again, it's the process.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, you're keep missing on the bench press. Let me tell you something. Don't miss a rep. And when you do barbell lifts, I want you to do 5 reps. That's what a freshman and sophomore needs to do. Sets of 5. When you do dumbbells and machines, go 8 to 12, maybe 15 on a machine. Then I get them to like look at this nutrition manual. So I try to teach like one thing each day. And then I get to watch the change. I'll watch a kid like walk somewhere, and then he's like flexing and looking at himself. And I'm like, here we go, baby. Like it's my buddy always says it's like, you got points on the scoreboard of sport, but what you really want is points on the scoreboard of life. To me, that's everything, because sports eventually end, but exercise can go forever.
Yeah.
And so that's what I really want to build into anybody, is utilizing strength training as a means, as a vehicle to get better at life. And that's why I think like a lot of successful companies, they put a fitness center in their building, because they know that people who are investing in their health, they're just better workers. You're better people. Yeah. I know that if I don't train in the morning, I'm not the most, I don't want to say I'm like mean or anything, but I'm a better person if I've trained in the morning, for sure. Yeah. And so to me, it's like when I look at training, it's like, all right, we're going to train for sport, but there has to be this emotional aspect, it has to be transcending the sport. It has to transcend the gym walls. Yeah. Because what's great, and listen, sometimes it doesn't work. Because I remember a kid, I don't know why I have like a real, you ever see that movie A Beautiful Mind, where like everything he sees is like numbers? Yeah. I see that with like weight training. And it just hit me, this kid 2 years ago, I can't remember, I think he was a football player. And then he's like, I'm not training anymore. He's like, there's no need to. I don't play football anymore. And all I thought to myself was, where did I fail that kid that he thought we're just going to train for football? And so sometimes, we could get caught up as a strength coach or a sport coach on the wins. But I had heard about, who was the guy at UCLA, the basketball coach, the famous coach? Wooden, John Wooden.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They said that he never yelled at the kids, and he rarely spoke about the score. He spoke about honesty with yourself. Are you doing your best? And he taught them little things like, don't let your sock have a little fold in your shoe because you're going to get blisters. That's a little detail, but those details do matter. Or when you are, before practice in the game, you're going to double knot your shoes. That makes a difference. So for me, all these like little details that you could share with somebody, the goal is not to overwhelm them. Give them a little thing, let them experience victory, identify it, say, hey, you couldn't do a push-up 2 weeks ago. Now you're doing 5. That's 500% stronger than you were. And then that's what they need. And I think that's what's missing, because the phone doesn't give you feedback. You're just a consumer. You're an empty consumer. There's no conversation.
Yeah.
Being coached it's hard for a kid. It's hard for an adult, because now you have to hear what you have to work on. You're being told that this is how you get better. And so because there's so much communication through the phone, or consumption, not communication.
Yeah.
I have to explain to athletes, don't take this personally. Meaning a kid cried when I kept telling him to squat lower. He cried. Okay, we can't cry when somebody tells you to squat low.
There's no crying in weightlifting.
There's no crying, I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff, but that was, now I'm never shocked. And sometimes I find myself too much on a side of the spectrum where I'm like maybe pushing something with winning. Like, for example, I was doing a lot of closing out every training session. Then I spoke to a buddy of mine in Indiana. And he's like, I never close out. He's like, it's not my time. It's theirs. It's their team. So I was like, dang it. I've been closing out all the time. So then I let the kids close out, and then they struggle with speaking.
Yeah.
And so I had a kid almost cry. So now I say, hey, if anybody's having a hard time, I'm your wingman. I'm going to be right here. I'll come in and, I'll help you do the speech a little bit. But of course, I want this speech to be so great, and then kids struggle with stuff. But at least we're doing it now.
Yeah.
I was doing it all. And when you do everything for somebody, like being a dad, if I keep doing everything for my kids, no, I'm not helping them. I had a kid at the school, not even in my class. It may have been this week or last week. He didn't do a project for, let's say it was math. And he's in phys ed class, and he wanted to go do the project at this other teacher. I don't know who the teacher is, but I said, listen, you're not in my class. And isn't that homework? Don't you have to do that at home? He's like, yeah, but yesterday I had basketball. I go, listen, I'm going to talk to you as I always tell you, like I would talk to my own son. Everybody's in basketball, baseball, football, you name it.
That was an excuse.
Yeah, so I said, did you have 7 hours of basketball? No, I had to go to my grandma. Okay, you went to your grandma. Does grandma not allow you to do homework? I go, listen, you could ask your teacher, maybe she'll let you go. But I go, what lesson are we going to teach you if we let you go? And he says, no lesson. I said, maybe you need to take the bad grade so you learn that this needs to be done at home. And if you're choosing to be an athlete, that sometimes means homework. You might not get the 8 hours of sleep I want you to because you got home late and this and that. Now you got to do your homework. You got to do your homework.
Sometimes you just got to sacrifice,
That's right. Or I don't even call it a sacrifice. Maybe we're just doing what we got. This is what I have to do. Like when I wake up early, there's times where I set my alarm early so I could, I'm grilling food all the time for my 2 kids. My son is eating like it's going out of style.
Yeah.
But if I got to wake up at 5:30 because I got to feed the dogs, make them breakfast, and grill the chicken, it takes what it takes. Like, I don't know. I'm a dad. I don't have an option. I don't want you buying the school lunch. I got to make the chicken at this time. And I'm going to tell you where I learned it. I didn't learn it on my own. I learned it because my coaches in high school taught me that you signed up for this and we don't quit. And we're not here to have you do a good job. And that's where I came up with good enough is the death of greatness.
Yeah.
Like, who wants a good enough job? So I'll ask the kids too. Hey guys, you want me to yawn and check my phone 50 times during this training session? Or you want me to have the energy? And do you want me to coach you up? Do you want me to ignore you on the half squat or let you do it wrong? Do you want me to ignore you on the dangerous bench that you're doing too heavy that's going to, decapitate you? Or you want me to tell you to do it right? And so what I'm learning every day, every day I make mistakes coaching and I'm just trying to get better, is these kids don't maybe have the coaching experiences, meaning you could go to a pretty fancy, travel team, AAU, and you could not get coached. I've paid for them with my kids, and I'll watch, somebody I've paid thousands of dollars to look at their phone a lot. And all I say to myself is like, you can't pay me to do that. I'm training somebody's kid. But I think I got lucky, wrestling, it's not that wrestling taught it to me. It's my wrestling coaches taught me the standard of excellence is this is what we do. There's no sugarcoating it. And
Wrestlers are pretty dedicated.
Not all of them, though. I hate to admit it. Not all of them. See, there's some people have wrestled. Some people are wrestlers. Same thing in football. Some people are out on that field giving and taking the hits. And others are just on the sideline.
Yeah, I think especially
and they're okay with it.
I played football, wrestling, and when I look at the kids, you look at there's some that are just physically gifted. You know what I mean? You're talking about like the D1 athlete, like parents.
Genetics are a real thing.
I hate wrestling in jiu-jitsu when they beat the crap out of me. I always tell them straight up. I hate wrestling.
But you have that, and then you have the kids that just really want to do it. You know what I mean? That put in the work, that are there. You know what I mean? Those kids, it's. I have a lot of love for just
me too.
Those kids that are just drive, and they just that's just I'm going to do it no matter what. You know what I mean?
And those kids, what I try to explain to their parents is that they may not even get a lot of playing time until senior year.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 3 years of working and working, not just the kid working, mom and dad buying more food, cooking more, committing to waking up early to drop your son off at school for a 6:15 a.m. lift. I know that
was my wife's life.
Yes, I know that is tough on the parents. And so I try to explain to them that I would be lying to you if I am telling you that your son is going to go from 120 pounds to 175 this year, 50 pounds, in a year. But here's what I tell them. If they just gain a pound a month, it doesn't sound like a lot. That's 12 pounds this year. It doesn't even look like much in a year. But 2 years later, that kid's 25 pounds heavier and stronger. That looks different. Yeah. And then by the end of high school, 50 pounds is different. And most kids can do more than that. So it's my friend just did a podcast on this. He trains world champion jiu-jitsu guys, and the one guy lost in the finals of this world championship, and the guy's like, "I'm so sorry." He's like, "Dude, so what? We fucking lost." He's like, "If we just judge this by the outcome," he's like, it's the process."
Is this the last NADCC that just passed?
I think they were out in Vegas. I think they were in Vegas.
Okay.
Yep. So my buddy John Wellborn, power athlete, he's like, it's process. And he reminded me, he said it more eloquent than me. He's also his major was in rhetoric. So I'm like, yeah, you're going to be a lawyer, so you're much better spoken than I am. But that's what parents who were not competitive athletes don't understand. And so, what's hard for me as a coach is I need to get in front of the parents much more. And so as much as the kids are distracted by the phone, let's try to have a meeting with the parents when mom and dad got to get this kid there, the other kid there, they got a third kid here. You need a clone. And so it keeps coming back to we're shoving too much stuff down their throat. And I think when they start doing all that, they're not really attacking any of it. They're trying to survive from one thing to the next. And, what I do from a private sector standpoint is I've trained my coaches to, okay, if John Smith or Susie Smith is coming here and she trained at school, you need to find out what they did, and now we're going to fill in the gap. When I'm training 50 to 60 athletes at a time, let me tell you, the quality is much different than when I'm training 10 kids at a time. Yeah. That's a fact. I'm not going to say it's the same. I'd be lying to myself and everybody else. It's not as good. And some kids will hide, and some kids will not do the work. I mean, I had to address this with a student that he did nothing for over 10 minutes in a sport where kids have been known to break bones and be paralyzed, and you're not taking it seriously. So I need, to help athletes grow is a team effort where the sport coach has to match the strength coach. We have to have the same culture, the same expectations, and we have to also bring it into the household of the parents. And so for some parents who weren't competitive athletes, it might be a shock to them, like, oh my God, how much food do I need to buy? Well, listen, this is what it takes. If you're signing up for this, and my job is to protect your son and daughter, this is what we need to do. And so it's many pieces of the puzzle. And if only one piece of the puzzle is out, that 100% goes to a 95, then a 90. And before you know it, you're at an 80. You're at a B minus.
Yeah.
You're basically a middle of the road athlete. And so the middle of the road has been eliminated in athletics. But for the kids that are willing to work, that cliche saying of hard work beats talent. When talent doesn't work hard, it eventually does work out that way. There are outliers, no doubt. There's the genetic freaks. Some kids are fast, they're jacked, they have the IQ, they pick up the sport, and they don't have to do the work. I tell the kids, don't model that person because that's 1 in a million. They really, maybe that's 1 in thousands. For the most part, you need strength training 3 days a week for athletes. You need to do off-season skill work on your own, not necessarily. See, I think if basketball players would go to the park more, play pickup games, you're better off than AAU. You learn to think for yourself. When you always have a coach.
AAU's become like a showcase. You have to.
My son plays
AAU.
baseball. I see the same. They're like, oh, these college coaches are going to be here. Da da da. I have a lot of friends at high-level colleges. I've coached at college. I've been in, those camps where it's like an ID camp. There's video footage now. Coaches could see you from very far, but coaches are also going to recruit. Sometimes they bypass the crazy parents if that kid is such a crazy high level.
Yeah.
But now also with the transfer portal, kids are transferring like crazy. I have a buddy at a pretty big D1 school. I can't remember the percent. I feel like he said it was like 50% of his football team is new.
Really?
So how can I develop anybody if you keep leaving every year?
Yeah.
I can't. And look, sometimes
Even that camaraderie. I mean, it's all of it's gone.
sometimes you're just not going to make it on that team. You got to that school, and then you're like, dang, the level here is way too high. I made a mistake. That's okay. Okay, transfer out. But you have to also be okay with developing. And so here's the heartbreaking thing. Whether it's college or high school, I make a connection with a kid, then they quit the sport because they got cut or they didn't play a lot. Okay, but that's who you were. You can become more if you can work. I don't get better as a strength coach if I just keep reading the same book and talk to the same other coaches. I need to actually, get exposed and work with people smarter than me, who are better than me, and who've coached more than me, and who say, Zach, I actually wouldn't do that. I would do this. That's what I want.
Yeah. And
that's what people in general need to start craving. If you want to get better, you got to be okay with sucking.
Yeah.
Like today, I went shooting, and it's the first time I got my own AR. And I said to the guy when I left, I was like, I take this from Dave Tate. I was like shitty when I got here, and I went to suck. And I think I'm like at crap right now. But I think next time I might
improved a little bit.
Next time I'll maybe get to good a little bit. He's like, there's a good chance. But, you got to start at the bottom unless, like you said, you're a genetic freak or, for the parents listening, we say it all the time, multiple sports. Okay? So, like, my son did soccer, baseball, wrestling, basketball. Now he's basketball and baseball, basketball. a lot of strength training, of course. But you know what we always say is like the 2-3 years of wrestling he did was the best thing because the coach taught him so much about like grit and toughness and all that stuff. And, you know, people would be really surprised to see how hands-off I am with my kids. You know, of course, hey, I got the food. I'll take you where you got to go. I'll pay for the stuff. But when you're playing, you don't hear me.
Yeah.
It's you and the coach. When you're got a tournament coming up, if you don't do your warm-ups, I'm not going to remind you to do it. I'll let you blow it. And then I'll make sure you understand that you had an obligation not only to yourself, but to your teammates and your coach. And I remember my son learned that lesson a year ago. Was a very good baseball player. But then the week before the last tournament, didn't go out and hit on the tee and do all that stuff and was, you know, hanging out with the friends and going to watch girls' soccer games and all this stuff. And in that tournament, he didn't get on base. He hit the ball. He didn't strike out, but he got a pop out or he got forced out. And I said to him, I go, now you know it all counts. You because you were so good, you thought you could just, that week could just be whatever.
Yep.
But now you know that if you would have spent 5 minutes a day swinging that bat, you could have helped your team better and you could have helped yourself. But if I would have forced him to do it, he never would have been embarrassed enough to do it. And now I don't have to tell him this is what it takes.
That happened to me. I was running track, and I was gifted. I was always fast, you know. And I mean, I'm always, you know, top 3, you know, wherever we were. And we were doing the All Shore Classic, and I used to run every morning. I would wake up before school, and from my house, right, all the way back around the elementary school and back was just under a mile. And I used to try to sprint it as fast as I possibly can. And I used to listen to old school, like, you know, when we were growing up, we had like Carl Lewis and, you know, things like that. So I had, you know, like old school like recordings on a, you know, on a cassette tape. I had to put like the, you know, the paper underneath it so I can record it, you know.
In a Walkman?
Yeah, in a Walkman, right?
I love it. Sony Walkman.
I put it in and I would run and you'd hear like, you know, on the outside, Carl Lewis is, you know, and I'm listening to it as I'm running. I would just like sprint the whole time. Got cocky. So I went to right before the All Shore Classic. I just was like, I'm not gonna do it today. You know what? I'm gonna eat like I just got it in my head. You know, I'm just gonna eat some pasta and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do these things.
Loading like Michael Scott.
Yeah, you know? And I'm like, forget it. You know. So got killed. I came in dead last.
You think it was a mental thing, or your body was so trained up, used to doing the?
I think my body was just trained. Yeah. I think like it was so used to doing that run in the morning and getting. It was almost. It was mental. You know what I mean? It was mentally. It would get me ready.
That is such a great point because you know a lot of the I'd say younger coaches get so caught up in the science.
Yeah.
But I have watched how the mental aspect can deny the science. Meaning, you know. I could think of so many examples, but like they shouldn't train like this, but when they do, they were better. So I don't keep up with college sports too much, but the previous strength coach at Alabama, he left and went to Georgia to be a position coach. If we looked at the science, we would say he's a shitty strength coach. They'd come in, they'd hang from the bars. He'd be like, what does it take to break you? You know, he would just do dumb things. He would do forced reps. They were all over machines. Everything that you're quote unquote not supposed to do to be a great football player.
Sounds good to me, by the way.
Right. It sounds like a bodybuilder workout.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got the genetic freaks, but they're training so hard that they had maybe this indestructible confidence. The guy that coaches now, I'm not going to say I'm friends with him, but we communicate a lot through social media. He's extremely intelligent. He's an amazing strength coach. They're extremely scientifically based. They've got all the best technology. And then my buddy who coached at Wisconsin for football for over a decade, and it was 14 years, he's like, I'm going to tell you, they are nowhere near as physical as they were when they had the guy Scott. I'm like, what? And I mentioned the guy's name. I'm like, that guy's effing awesome. He's like, dude, it's just it goes to show you. We've had that conversation before. Training the wrong way if it boosts the mind, it's important to do.
Yeah.
Because if you're not confident, that confidence is a secret weapon.
Yeah.
And by the way, I actually had a training partner who was kind of lazy, who would skip. If the coach was watching, he would look and take a knee. And he placed in the States as a second-year wrestler. And then he was an All-American JUCO wrestler, third and fourth-year wrestler. I've never heard of anybody happening. But I'll tell you what, he was kind of crazy. He's like, yeah, I could beat. He thought he could beat everybody. He had like a legit God complex. And his confidence negated his crazy lifestyle. I mean, we laugh, but I would kill myself.
100%.
I would kill myself in training. And what does this guy do? Take a knee. Taking a knee while their back is to me. He would cheat. And, and that's why I learned to try to match training to the personality of a kid. So if I know a kid thrives on the hard work, I will take him down that road a little bit more. If I know a kid needs to be optimal, feel healthy and rested, I will back him off a little bit. I might walk up to him and, I remember doing this in the college setting. I could watch them warm up and feel the energy or lack of. And I saw this one kid who was the fifth-year seniors. They've got more mileage on the body. I remember walking up to the kid. I said, listen, get under this weight. This is the warm-up weight. Do this set, and I want you to walk out, take a shower, and go back and take a nap. What? I said, just do this set real quick and go shower, go walk out like you're going to the restroom, shower, and go take a nap. And then they tell me later, coach, I needed that so bad.
That rest.
Yep. Or then another kid will text me on the weekend, approaching the Monday, coach, I like when we do the plyometrics. I need to work my fast twitch muscles. Can we work on that? So then I tweak the warm up a little bit so he believes in what we're doing. Then if we're squatting heavy and I know he doesn't like heavy squats, and then I see, okay, don't add weight after this set. Focus on speed. Now he believes in the program. He believes in himself. Then I know he gets almost embarrassed that somebody's stronger than him. So I'll say, last 5 minutes, choose one or two exercises. What does he do? He weighs 125 pounds. He'll do weighted pull-ups with 90 pounds. So he could show, I'm stronger than you. Well, that builds his confidence. You want to do arms, that builds your... So there's things I'll do that don't scientifically make sense, but it's good for them. And then I'm going to tell you this. There's also a point where eventually it's on the kid to do the work. He or she has the responsibility to train whether I'm watching you or not, especially in the crowded weight room, like at the high school setting. You have these opportunities, I tell them, to be working. We call that character. What do you do when nobody's watching? And that's why I like giving kids time for their own, because it's gives them the opportunity to exercise responsibility. I got time on my own. Am I going to do tricep pushdowns, or does somebody go over and squat?
Yeah.
So you'll see, hey, listen, whatever builds your confidence. So, what builds, you were mentioning sprinting. Some people feel great when they sprint. Others feel great when they've lifted something heavy. And then others, it's weird, others don't care. They don't care if they win. They don't care if they lose. And that's something that we're seeing with, it was probably, I just see it more because I'm aware. But my old wrestling coach, I'm still in touch with him. He's like, Zach, that stuff was always around. He's like, the difference is you were a good kid. You followed directions. You listened. You didn't party. He's like, so you didn't really recognize what was going on around you.
Yeah.
And, I'm also aware of now being a dad made me a better coach, because I always think of like, how would I want, or how would somebody else want me to coach their son? How would I want my son or daughter to be coached? Would I want my kid's coach to be on the phone? What about after my son loses a baseball game? Ignore the team, or have a sit down with them and finish on a positive? So I always think about those things. Being a dad made me a better coach. Before, when my kids were babies or before that, I may have been too crazy, but
It mellowed you out a little bit?
yeah, but that generation of kids pre-2010, pre-2012, they handled it better. And then location, geography changes things, meaning, if we grew up in Dagestan, we would probably all be wrestlers and then MMA fighters.
Yeah.
My gym in Manasquan has a very different breed of kid than my kid in Edison. The kids that trained with me in Edison, had a lot of things. We would lose kids to crime. I lost one kid got murdered. We lost kids. Now we lose kids because they go to another gym or they quit the sport.
Yeah.
Being in Edison, coming from a very street type place, I would speak to the kids differently. The kids spoke to each other differently.
Yeah.
So it was just different. So geography changes the kids.
Do you feel like I feel personally my parents really, I mean, maybe I just had bad parents, I don't know, but I didn't have the type of parents that drove me to practice and they didn't push me to work out, what I
Right.
mean? It was all on me.
Correct.
And I don't know if it was just because of the way I grew up or it was just our generation at the time.
Probably our generation. I mean, I would ride I grew up in Edison, but recreation for us was in Fords, Woodbridge. So I rode my bike there. That was just normal activity. Going to somebody's house, running was our mode of transportation, not training.
Yeah.
Manhunt was our speed and agility,
Yeah.
not going to paying somebody. Learning to lift weights was done in, my dad has a bench down here. Let's try to bench press. So that FIO, figure it out on your own, was very powerful. Also, you're 44, Brian's in his 50s, I'm 48 almost.
I'm 50. Not in my 50s.
He's 50,
He's 50 plus.
50 plus. Was there travel baseball?
I don't remember it.
You played, I remember our baseball team in Edison, by the way, I don't want to say our, when I wrestled. The baseball team in Edison was ranked 4th in the country, not county, not New Jersey, country.
Yeah.
Those guys all played football. Some wrestled, most played basketball, and then they went baseball. 3 sport. I think they maybe did some summer stuff, but you were overall athletic. They didn't lose accuracy from throwing that they didn't throw in you couldn't play baseball in the fall. And also, we do less. Remember you were asking about overtraining? I didn't even know the football team until like 2 years ago had the whole weekend off. I was like, you don't go in on Saturday to do film and then we lift? No, it's all weekend off. So really, they have like 3 practice days, or maybe 4. You have a game, you have a walkthrough on Thursday.
Yeah.
You have 3 practice days, and all 3 of them aren't hard. My body still hurts from wrestling 30, 25 plus years ago. I know what it's like to get the bumps and the bruises. Even being older, what makes me feel better is strength, being strong. And when I say strength, that's power, doing cleans, doing sprints.
I was going to ask, what does your regimen look like now?
I usually will train them Monday through Friday. I'll go like lower, upper, Monday lower, Tuesday upper, Wednesday full body. It's like a lot of carrying and
I do the
calisthenics.
same exact thing.
Sleds every day, sled drags in the beginning and the end.
No sleds for me, though.
Sleds. A lot of gyms have the sleds.
You have a lot
yeah.
of this in your book?
In the book, yeah.
Now it's getting I tried to get that for my son, and I
should
couldn't
be-
get it. Now it's
yeah.
getting re-released, right?
The 31st, which has been it's been rough. I wrote the book with a publisher, and then he was getting it published in China. And then when COVID happened, that stopped, and they were just ebook. And I said, listen, that's my life's work.
Yeah.
And I could do an ebook.
Yeah.
So I just, you heard that saying, you don't know, just ask. So I was like, what would it take to get the rights back to the book?
Yeah.
He's like, we could give you the rights back. Let me get my attorney, and then I had my attorney look at it and they said, yeah, now you got the book. And I was like, oh.
What year did you originally write it?
That book was published it was right before I got hired at Lehigh, the fall of 2014. Although I started writing ebooks in, I think, 2002. The first one I wrote was actually purchased through a forum. Back in the day, there was no social media. So the forum, it was a MMA website in the UK. Yeah, it was called Shoot Fighting UK.
Shoot fighting.
And I would, answer training questions on the forum, And then somebody said, "Oh, you should make a ebook. People would buy it." And so I remember people. That was the early days of PayPal. Somebody and I remember I didn't even know how to transfer the PayPal money to the bank. I was so clueless with technology. And that book was written 10 years ago, and now my philosophy has changed. It's different, and also some of my philosophy is going more back to that because. As I mentioned earlier, all these injuries I'm seeing, we lack durability. Remember I said a lot of trainers are training for the sport, for this thing here, this little thing?
Yeah.
What about the 5 months that the body has to withstand taking the hits, the legs, sprinting, every single day? So I think that's where a lot of coaches make the mistake. They're not building durable athletes. They're building athletes who could perform for a game, but they can't withstand it. You can't withstand the pressure. So that style of training is very good for athletes, especially with all the travel they have. And who loves it? Military. So I got that one author proof. I sent it to a friend of mine who's in SEAL Team 6. And what's interesting about SEAL Team 6, specifically DevGru, is one of the guys that I used to work with at Blair is his older brother's in DevGru. I'd have to find out if he's in DevGru yet. So it's been cool. I worked with you, 10 years ago, and now you're part of you're just
now you're a ninja.
Yeah, you're with the best. They love that training because it encompasses everything they need. You have to be durable, strong, powerful. Building muscle, it builds confidence for a teenager as it does for a young man or an older man. I'm almost 50. I'm still training hard. I could do the workouts our kids do, but I need longer warm-ups. My warm-ups are real, thorough. So my warm-up would be sled drag 100 feet, back extensions, 10 reps, reverse hyper, 15 reps, band pull-aparts, face pulls, band triceps, 10 push-ups, 10 pull-ups, standing leg curl, one-arm kettlebell carry, 2 to 3 rounds, 15-minute circuit, really get everything, get your car lubed up essentially. That's what I need to feel. Then I'm good. I also do a lot of shoulder health stuff because as you get older, it's your knees, shoulders, back.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the training style I did in my early years damaged my knees.
Yeah.
Coupled with all the wrestling. I would run a lot when I should have done strength training.
So let's settle this one debate.
Yeah.
Military press behind the neck.
Oh, yeah.
Good or bad?
It depends. I'm going to give you
a lot of current guys were getting hurt.
Yeah, it was.
They were putting the weight on it.
Yeah, you see people now, they're doing it, and they're like, don't do it. I do it all the time.
Right. So it depends. If you have good lat mobility and shoulder mobility, you're good. But what if you played baseball and or volleyball and you have a history of overhead activity? Then I'm going to minimize it. But that behind the neck position is good if your body has trunk stability, shoulder stability, and lat mobility.
I like it gives me a good, kind of, I call it just that wrench, you know what I mean? that little turn.
Some people, it works good.
I love it. Just on
it was a very popular exercise, but you still see weightlifters doing it, Olympic weightlifters. So I will watch what weightlifters do overseas. Not just the Americans. So that's the positive to Instagram is I'm getting to look at the Chinese Olympic weightlifting hall. What are their weightlifters doing? What is happening in, with this pro athlete? I could see some people, will travel and they'll record, hours of footage and post it on YouTube. So we will sometimes do behind the neck jerk, which is a power movement, squat down, boom, dip under it.
Yep.
But I look at what exercise is best suited for the athlete and for my situation. So I could do certain things at my private facility with groups of 8 to 12 on average that I will not do in a group of 50 to 60. Or like I told you guys last week, I had 80 kids in a weight room. And then again, it's high school. High school needs brilliance with the basics. So that behind the neck press is a lot of exercises could be it depends.
Yeah, you look at like Arnold's Bible we were talking about before.
Love it.
I mean, it's most of those exercises now are considered
Taboo.
Yeah.
What about for 50-year-old guys who are going to be 51 and can barely make
naps
it through
and oatmeal?
barely make it through 3 classes in jiu-jitsu?
I would do some real minimalist strength training with you. I would do sleds, and sleds are at Retro Fitness.
Everywhere. Powerhouse has.
Yes.
Yeah.
All gyms have kind of. Powerhouse used to be mom and pop bodybuilding gyms. I trained at the old Powerhouse next to the old Rahway State Prison, or it's East Jersey State Prison. By the way, when we talk about learning, in 2006, I spent half a day in prison to interview inmates to learn about training.
Wow.
So I always say to coaches, I'm like, listen, what are you doing to learn? You're looking on Instagram. I went to prison to learn better training. I will go whatever it takes to learn.
What is their regimen like?
And bring-
Some of those guys are jacked when they come out.
What was interesting is
They can't do it anymore, right? You can't.
Oh no, you can. I think California removed the weights. Maybe California brought the weights back, but in it's actually Avenel. I actually drove through it the other day picking up some equipment from Clark. But I have a lot of stories, but I'm going to bring this one down shorter. So
Vince has to get to his other job.
right, Vince is, I hope, having taking notes, having a good time here. When I went there, a friend of mine, it was her stepdad. He was a lieutenant. Do you remember Scared Straight?
Yes.
That show?
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, they could just go on YouTube. And I was basically.
I went through the program when I was Yeah, I was in Jackson.
the Scared. Oh, you had to legit?
Yeah.
Oh my
legit.
God. Wait, where did you go?
So those taking
Joe, I
notes
thought
on-
you were joking. This is
No,
great.
no,
Let's
no.
hear your story.
Yeah, no, I was in alternative school.
Yeah, we know. We
in
haven't
high
gotten
school in
into
Jackson.
this.
Oh, you did. So you went to
Yeah.
which prison though?
Scared Straight. We went to Ocean County.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I was in.
They don't
I
do
guess
it Monmouth anymore.
I don't know.
Ocean is tougher than Monmouth. Let's just settle it. Just telling the truth. Listen, I live in Monmouth County.
Yeah, we had like a Goals for Youth program. So we had football players used to come out and kind of meet with us, and
Yeah.
they were kind of our mentors. Yeah.
That and like they say today that doesn't work. That screaming and they say kids are just not scared of. Or maybe I've also heard my friends that are cops. They're like, there's no repercussions. They're like arresting people. They're like, unless somebody murdered somebody, they're getting out. But the lieutenant who brought me in, he ran. I didn't think he ran the whole thing, but he was part of that crew.
Yeah.
So I spoke with one of the guys who I think in the 70s, early 80s was part of the powerlifting team. Okay. Then the other guys were part of the boxing team. They don't have those teams anymore.
Yeah.
What was crazy was, of course,
These
when
were inmates.
inmates, yeah. I was put in a room about twice the size of this. It was like the laundry room, and then they left me.
Yeah.
The guy was like 6'6", 275. I was like, what the hell?
They did that with kids back then. They used to, like high school kids, we used to go into, into
saw
like
it. Yeah.
general population, just hang out.
They left you. So this guy, was kind of like tough to get conversing at first.
That might be a whole nother podcast. Joe.
I would love to hear that. But he spoke to me about his regime. He was basically power bodybuilding, one body part a day, Monday through Friday. Saturday, lots of calisthenics, everything 100 reps, very regimented. At the time, I think he may have been somewhere around our age. All those guys were hovering in their 40s, early 50s.
Yeah.
So after speaking with him for an hour, maybe a bit longer, the lieutenant takes me through the prison, and I could see the prison yard, whatever they call it, the weight pile. And I looked through, like, it's not a window, but it was like the fan. And I was like, are you taking me out there to go see it? He's like, can I curse? And I was repeat what he said. Or he's like,
Yeah, absolutely.
He's like, do you want to get fucking killed? It's like, I didn't know where you're taking me. It's like, all right, just take me where we don't get killed.
Yeah.
So I see the guys outside lifting. The benches were made of cement. So an incline bench was, cement, everything's cement.
Yep.
So then he takes me to the upstairs old gym, old basketball gym, beautiful old wooden floor. Like you could just feel the history in there. And then it was like a little weight area. and all the weights were welded on. Okay, so you couldn't like switch weights. So
Yeah.
I think it was a danger then, somebody
Fixed
could like,
bars.
yeah, they could throw a plate at you or whatever. They had like a T-bar row with, all kinds of plates welded onto it. And so when he brought me there, the guys that were with me, there was, I can't remember, 4, 5, 6 of them. They were very much into the calisthenics because they were on the boxing team. So when they were trained to be boxers, they would I guess like Rawway or East Jersey State Prison would fight against Monmouth and then fight against Ocean. So I guess it was like, New Jersey interstate prison fighting. They were telling me like we would take the heavy bag and run down the stairs, loop around, run up the stairs, 5 minutes. Then we would do speed bag, 5 minutes, heavy bag, 5 minutes, spar in the ring, 5 minutes. Then like easy bar curl, very light, and side raise, very light, 10 reps. It sounded like Rocky 2 training. He's like, our boxing coach didn't believe in heavy weightlifting. But those guys told me, now he's like, in the morning, I do 5 sets of 50 push-ups before we go out for breakfast.
Yeah.
5 sets of 50. So lots of calisthenics. And, I have a good friend who we met through all this strength and conditioning. He went to prison in like his earlier mid-20s for, I think, like 8, 9 years for selling marijuana. He's like, I get out of prison and I see dispensaries, everywhere. But he learned he learned a lot of strength and conditioning through that. And, when he got out of prison, he started his personal training business. Then it became strength and conditioning. And he had a son, that he had to watch kind of grow up through elementary school. When he got out of prison, his son was like 7th, 8th grade. He coached his son in football and training. They become this unstoppable force. His son plays football now at Georgia Southern. But it's awesome. Like he learned training methods through inmates. Then he trained inmates how to do, all kinds of different training methods. So he turned that negative into a positive. What was heartbreaking about the Scared Straight guys was, they shared a bit of the story. They didn't super hash it out for me, but they were all like teenage 14 and 16-year-olds who were like, I think, part of like a robbery, not holding a gun. And somebody else in that group shot and killed like a store clerk. And now they're, locked up for life. But when I'm talking with them, it's like hanging out with one of the guys. Yeah. Nice guys who all I could think about was they're just making the best out of this situation. They're locked up for life. I don't know. Maybe they will have been released. But all those experiences I've had, plus my own lack of being coachable as a kid, I try to remember that with the kids I work with, that I'm working with a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old. It's, I have high expectations, but then I remind myself they're kids and, they're trying to find themselves. So they're not always going to listen to me. Yeah. And that's part of life is getting the chance to make a decision and having a consequence. And, like I said to the one kid, listen, maybe you need to take this bad grade to learn the lesson that you got to do the work. What's heartbreaking, though, is when you see a kid who's like 6'4", 6'5", right? These kids that could do it, and then they don't even try. It's like, come on, you gotta at least try. Yeah. And so schools were kind of like afraid to challenge kids. And so when they do get challenged, it's too much of a shock. Yeah. And so looking back, growing up in the 80s, you want to know why really I look back to why did you train? Because I remember like you could get your ass kicked riding your bike home. Yeah. But when you started putting on muscle, people treated you differently. Yeah. You
also had a good influence too. Like your brother was in the military, right?
Oh yeah. My older brother, by the time he went into the military, and the military changed my older brother because he actually failed out of college in one semester. And then what happened was in our neighborhood, we were next, the one house next to us was like a rental. Always somebody new, every 6 months to a year. Well, it was, I wish I could remember his name. We called him Sergeant Oh, I can't remember his last name, but
Slaughter?
I know. I was thinking Sergeant Slaughter. What was his last name? He was a Marine recruiter.
Okay.
And he would start he had like a hot rod car that he would start at like 5:15 in the morning. And it was like, and it would just run for 45 minutes. And I could look out my window and I would see Sergeant, I forget his name. He would be on the lawn doing push-ups, crunches, flutter kicks, like 45 minutes of PT while his hot rod was warming up. So it was like no matter how well rested, how much sleep I needed, Sergeant Craziness was. So he recruited my brother.
I was going to say, is that how your
that's
brother
hilarious.
got into the Marines?
Before
Yeah.
my parents knew about it. A guy who lived 3 houses away, who his kids, in the neighborhood said, listen, I don't think your son has signed up for the Marines. Your neighbor said he's 18. He doesn't need parental permission. My parents were like, oh, shit.
Your
And
parents were in the military, right?
Yes.
Were they against him going into the
their
military?
concern was if something happens to you in the American military, they didn't know what is the outcome. We knew a kid in our neighborhood who went to Marines. He was this fit, strong, tough kid. He came back, was like, yeah, I got hurt. And somebody said something to the effect, when you're hurt, and even if you're not hurt and you're making it up, the Marines don't want to hear your bullshit. You're out. So my parents were like, and my
They call
brother
them lingerers.
lingers. You're like, yeah, you're dead weight. You're out.
Yep.
Which we don't do that anymore, right? And we're trying to carry everybody.
Now they'll get 100% disability out of boot camp.
And they could then they start, really working the game, and it's sad. So my brother was set on being special forces. He wanted to be in any kind of special forces unit. So my parents sit him down and tell him, listen, if you want to go into special forces unit, you have to go to Israel. This way, if something happens to you, the government is going to take care of you.
Oh, over there they have a better.
I'm not sure, to be honest, the details of
Yeah.
it. I was kind of like, I don't know why I was not very involved in the whole thing. I was kind of like a kid that went to school, went to the gym, did homework in his room, didn't like get involved in these conversations. But all of a sudden, I find out he's going to go to Israel, and what he did to like really brush up on his Hebrew was he lived on a kibbutz for at least half a year, maybe like 8 months.
Wow.
And then he went into the Israeli army, the IDF, and got into a special forces unit. And he served in the Israeli army for like 2.5 years, whatever the number is. And then he saw me finish in college, and he's like, damn, I got to do that. So he comes back and goes into...
So he did the full Marines and then the idea.
He went to Israeli army first.
Oh, first.
So if you want to go to officer candidate school, he wanted to be officer, you have to have your 4-year degree. So he went to Middlesex County College, gets all these straight A's after failing out from a 4-year school. Then he goes to Columbia, and then he went to OCS. I still remember going to OCS graduation. Ironically, I've trained some kids now to go into OCS, but that OCS graduation was very, talk about excellence and the respect they had. Like after the graduation ceremony, we went to, a local restaurant, and, as you're walking, like other Marines are like, it's a great day today, sir, isn't it? Just the respect they were giving him. And, we went to a restaurant. You're getting seated first because you're second lieutenant, but he became a captain. But what were you going to say, Joe? We're jumping around with all these stories. You're talking about we're talking about the recruiting and everything.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Saying how his brother got recruited by the neighbor, and you were.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I was on my way this morning. I actually stopped by JSS, and
Is that where you got all this stuff, Joe?
that is where I got all of that.
This is really the stuff. And by the way, I know it's Jersey Shore supplements, but when I do a recommendation for athletes, I'm like, here's what you need. You need protein, you need creatine. And by the way, when parents ask, is creatine safe? Creatine is the most researched supplement.
Yeah.
It's been proven safe. And also for older men, I always say, quote unquote, older men, this is great for cognition.
Yeah.
This helps you focus. So that's why
Creatine does.
It helps with
Creatine
your
is
focus.
actually in meat, right? Isn't it in steak?
It's found in red meat, but you're of course getting a smaller amount. And then what we were saying off camera, with like food and whatnot, food today is just not as rich as what it was, in the 80s. And can you imagine eating steak and drinking milk in the 60s and eating eggs? That was probably like really feeling like you're.
Yeah, remember that old commercial with he's sitting in the mirror and he goes, "I'm drinking milk, and in a few years I'm going to be a lot stronger."
I just had ordered half a pig from a friend of mine who's a farmer.
Nice.
Just ate it for the first time today.
Very different.
And it was much different than store-bought.
Yeah, I started
Spinner
doing
Farms,
that.
New York State.
Where do you go?
Spinner Farms.
What area of New York?
It's way upstate. I don't know. She delivered it down here. It was something I grew up with, but the flavor is much different than store-bought.
Way different. So we started doing that during COVID. I started going to a farm in Pennsylvania, and I'm still doing it. And I actually organized. Yep, I get beef. He's a Mennonite farmer. You could see the cows. They're way different looking. They're almost
We were just
muscular
talking
looking.
about that. I want to do a cow.
Yeah, we were just saying that.
Not do a cow, but
That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the bestiality podcast.
That's
so
it off
different.
camera.
Yeah.
But you mentioned New York. On the way back, we go to Lake George every year. One of the wrestling coaches I know did the same thing. It's his backyard as a farm, and he's got the cows, and he's got the Piedmontese cow. And so it was like 10 minutes away from where we were, and I stopped, and he said, "Listen, I don't sell ground beef or cuts of beef. We do the half cow."
Yeah.
And so he gave me the eggs.
Do they process it for you, or do you?
He gave me the whatever cuts he had. But I think when you get a half cow, you get a lot of ground beef, and I think we got to shut it down. Right? We'll have to do a part 2.
Just want to keep
We
going
definitely
without
have to do a
Vince.
part 2. So anyway, that this was from JSS. I stopped by. They want to gift that for you and the kids.
I was hoping to get into the Israel stuff with you.
Yeah, yeah, we have a
current
lot to
events.
talk about.
Part 2.
If you want to come back,
I will.
I'd love it.
For sure. We'll do part 2. Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Sing a Beer for their sponsorship.
Yeah, Singer Beer actually gave us a
It's
sponsor.
the
Gave us a
best
couple
thing
cases.
to come out of Thailand since. I'll leave that blank.
Yeah, there you go.
I was told not to finish that.
That's
sentence.
great.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you,
back. I
guys.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Thank
This
you.
was the American Sidebar Podcast. Have a good day.